Parasite. Written by Alex Anderson. Inside the Ark, it smelled like home. Old leather, gun oil, and the faint scent of burnt toast. I flipped the switch, and the cabin was flooded with a thick, red light. In this gloom, the edges softened, the wrinkles on my face, the ones I tried to ignore in the mirror, they became invisible. First, the fire. I lit the gas stove. It answered with a cozy, low hum. Then the kettle. Its soft, rising whistle, combined with the burner's drone, built a wall of sound. This noise cut me off from whatever was left outside, from the silent quarry walls and those whitish buoys suspended in the icy water beneath my keel. Here, inside this steel shell, was my world. Out there was the parasite's territory. I pulled off a boot, hissing in pain. My calf muscle was still twitching, a tight stone knot. I pulled a bottle of antiseptic from the kit. The sharp, stinging smell of alcohol and iodine immediately fought the stench of chlorine and limestone dust. It was the smell of life. Clean, sterile, cruel. I poured it onto the scrape on my leg. The skin flared up as if a white-hot branding iron had been pressed against it. "Alive," I croaked, watching a drop of antiseptic crawl down my leg. "Old, beaten up, but alive." I poured 2 fingers of cheap whiskey into a heavy glass. The liquid burned my throat, sending a long-awaited warmth through my veins. The needle dropped onto the vinyl. A light crackle, and then the old blues filled the space, finally pushing the slurping sounds of that pharmacy monster out of my head. I emptied the bag onto the table. The blisters of amoxicillin scattered across the surface, dull glints in the red light. I counted them methodically, checking against the notes in my battered logbook. Antibiotics? Check. Fever reducers? Plenty. But when I reached the bottom of the bag, my blood turned cold. Empty. Not a single pack of corticosteroids. The very ampules I had crawled into that hole for were still there, on the shelf, where the thing had made its nest. Without them, crossing the mountain pass was suicide. That means tomorrow I have to go back. Not to the same pharmacy, I'm no fool, but there are still spots left in Montesilvano. I finished the whiskey in one gulp. The stove was working well. A heavy, cotton-like lethargy was spreading through the cabin. My body demanded sleep, but my mind kept building routes, calculating liters of diesel and grams of gunpowder. I locked the bulkhead leading to the cab, checked the bolt. Today, I won. I'm fed, I'm warm, and I'm just drunk enough not to see that pale vein in every shadow behind the window. Tomorrow will be a new day. If the sun decides to break through that bruise over our heads. Whiskey is a kind liar. It promises peace, but instead, it just opens the gate to those halls of memory, where I'm afraid to go sober. I fell into sleep instantly, as if falling off a cliff. The heavy hum of the stove transformed into the sound of the surf. Jurmala, my personal paradise, which once seemed eternal. The air here was different. Not that chalky slush of Montesivano, but a crisp cocktail of pine resin and salty Baltic freshness. The sand beneath my feet, cold, fine, like powdered sugar. "Dad, look!" Mark, my 7-year-old rascal, was running ahead, waving a piece of driftwood. The sun, pale and gentle, lit up his blonde hair, turning the boy into a little angel. We played. I threw him the ball, he laughed, and that laughter was the purest sound I'd ever heard. In that moment, there was no darkness, no arc, no empty cities, just us, the sea, and the endless horizon. I walked over to ruffle his hair, and Mark looked up at me. The world froze. The sound of the surf was replaced by that same wet, slurping sound I'd heard in the pharmacy. My son's blue eyes suddenly clouded with a whitish haze. They turned glassy, becoming strangers' eyes. And then, from within, from the very depths of his pupils, a black, bloody substance began to rise. The parasite. The mitochondrial filth filled his eyeballs, displacing life, turning them into cloudy, bulging lenses filled with a tarry suspension. "Dad." Mark's voice became dry, crunchy, like breaking branches. The thin veins on his neck bulged, turning black before my eyes. The skin on his face tightened, becoming pearlescent, transparent. I saw the black worms of this new, monstrous life moving beneath it. He was still smiling, but that smile no longer belonged to my son, but to the creature devouring him from within. I wanted to scream, to grab him, to shake that filth out of his lungs, but my legs were rooted in the sand. The sand suddenly turned gray, limestone, and instead of the sea, the stench of an open grave blew in my face. "Mark!" My own cry pushed me out of sleep like a cork from a bottle. I sat up on the bunk, breathing hard. The van was filled with a thick, red gloom. My heart pounded against my ribs like a trapped bird. Cold sweat broke out on my forehead, smelling of whiskey and horror. The hum of the stove continued, but now it sounded like the growl of a beast. I clenched my fists, feeling my nails dig into my palms. It was just a dream. The past is gone, and the future looks at me with black eyes from every alleyway. I reached for the glass. My hands were still shaking. Tomorrow, back to the city. We need those ampules, Mark. For your sake, or for what's left of me. Radio static burst into my consciousness before I could even open my eyes. That damned noise, jagged and filthy, like sandpaper on raw meat. Outside, it was early morning, though morning is too grand a word for the gray slush that filled the quarry. The fog turned my stone well into a bowl of milk. Visibility 3 meters. Beyond that, a wall. Somewhere down there, beneath the steel deck, my vertical neighbors were frozen in place. I didn't look down. Not today. I reached the antenna mast. The metal handle burned my palms with cold, but I turned it, squeezing every drop of sound from the ether. My voice was dry and foreign, as if I'd swallowed that same limestone dust. "Sandro, we're at the weather station." The voice broke through the static, thin and brittle, like ice. "The generator is dying. My wife, she's in labor. The car is dead. Please." I froze, gripping the mic. The filthy logic of survival, honed by years of quiet decay, kicked in instantly. If I can hear him this clearly, he has a stationary unit. He has scraps of power left, but not for long. Campo Imperatore, 40 kilometers away, a mile up, vertically. It's not just a road, it's a serpentine, twisted into hellish spirals. On those climbs, the arc becomes a heavy, clumsy coffin. The engine will boil on the way up. The brakes will melt into my boots on the way down. One blockade, one abandoned truck on a narrow ledge, and I'm trapped. The image from my dream flashed back. Mark, his eyes filled with that black filth. And this Sandro, up there in the ice, looking into the eyes of death, just like me. Another father, the same fear. I laid the map out on the table. The zigzags of the serpentine looked like claw marks from a giant beast. The risk wasn't just insane, it was mathematically suicidal. But my fingers were already reaching for the ignition. "Arc on the line," I spoke into the mic, staring at the gauges. "Do not turn that station off. Do you hear me? Don't you dare disconnect. I'm coming out." The engine answered with a deep, guttural growl. The entire barge trembled under the weight of the waking beast. Time to go. To be continued.